I will confess something to you on this holiest night of the year, on this night of confession. I can't read the news anymore. I can't bear the headlines. I am so fed up that I want to give up. Everything feels upside down and backwards. And yet, as we sit here tonight, I am once again glued to them, to the news and the headlines. I am filled with cautious hope about the new peace plan, and yet also I feel the familiar ache of uncertainty, dread, skepticism honed by our history. And if I'm being truly honest, I worry that no matter how this plays out, in the end, the world will still blame the Jews. It is so unbelievable, and yet it is undeniable. The countries and the leaders that I once respected speak with voices that are unmistakably anti-Semitic. And the politicians that I disagree with on almost everything else have become strangely and unnervingly the loudest defenders of the Jews, though too often for reasons that have nothing to do with love of our people and everything to do with scoring points, punishing opponents, or feeding their own ambitions. The rabbis say, olam hafuch, that the world is upside down, or maybe, hopefully, as regards to the promise of the proposed peace plan, it is right side up. I don't know what to think anymore. What I do know is that I watch police and media outlets defend anti-Semites and Jew haters of every stripe as if their bile is protected speech. I watch my own people blamed collectively and absurdly for the actions of Israel, for the enforcement of anti-hate laws, for daring even to demand protection from harassment and fear. And I see how feeble, how slow the response so often is. After the intimidation, after the vandalism and the assaults, it's always delayed for further investigation. I scroll through reports of extremism on the left and on the right, through the dismantling of democratic norms by those who cannot understand. I watch it unfold in the U.S. through manipulated maps, gerrymandered votes, and stacked courts that twist the system into a weapon. And I feel its ripples here in Canada, in the polarization of our own politics, in the erosion of our cherished Canadian civility, in the emboldening of anti-Semitism, even on our own streets. The counter-protests, the graffiti on our institutions, the uneasy looks many of us have felt walking through the city wearing a kippah or a Star of David. And I will confess something else. I take off my kippah when I go into Starbucks because I don't want them to spit in my coffee. And I don't think that if Hamas surrenders, my fear of encountering anti-Semitic bile is going to change. And maybe that last line was a little too literal, but you get my point. Anti-Semitic bile. Okay. I want to focus on my children's education, not anti-Semitism on campus. I want to take a vacation without being pulled away by breaking news. I want to walk the dog and be fully present with my family, to make dinner and to laugh with our friends, without the weight of the world on my chest and my phone buzzing with the latest updates and breaking news in my pocket. I want to have a conversation with someone without wondering whether that person leans left or leans right, worried that a simple conversation will stumble into a political minefield. And so I say nothing, and so do they. And yet, and here is the part that I want you to hear most clearly, I know that this despair, this exhaustion, is exactly what the haters and the extremists want. They want me, they want us to give up. They want us to stop reading, to stop showing up, to stop resisting, to stop fighting for decency, for dignity, for democracy. They want us so weary that we simply bow our heads and accept it. So terrified to say anything that we say nothing. And so here I stand on Kol Nidre with the Torah scrolls before us, with the melodies that we have carried for centuries in our ears, and I confess all of these sins. I confess that I am tired of being cautiously optimistic. I confess that I am in disbelief that my hopes for the future are in the hands of leaders left and right that I do not trust. I confess that I am fearful that the golden age of North American Judaism that I enjoyed as a child of the 70s and the 80s was the exception to the rule. I confess that they will always hate us, that they will always blame us. I fear that. I confess how quickly hope can be poisoned by cynicism, how quickly I am to dismiss the possibility before even giving it a chance. I confess my fear that the peace plan will collapse, that extremism will reassert itself, that bloodshed and violence and suffering will continue unchecked. I confess I have more despair than hope. For 1,000 years, Jews have gathered on this night and chanted Kol Nidre. We annul our vows. We say aloud all the promises and all the commitments I made that I cannot fulfill. All of the words that I spoke but could not carry, let them be undone. Let them be lifted. We admit that we are finite, that we overpromise, that we are not as strong as we want to be. We admit that the burdens we take on from the world, from our community, from ourselves, that sometimes they crush us. I admit all of that. Isn't it striking, though, that on the holiest night of the year, the prayer that opens up the gates of heaven is not a hymn of praise, not a declaration of faith. It's a cry of lamentation, a cry of limitation, a recognition that our words, our commitments, our very selves cannot always keep up with what the world demands of us. On this night, our tradition says, you can lay some of it down. You can step back. You can step away. And that is my prayer on this sacred night. Not to pretend that the world is better than it is, not to deny the hatred and the hypocrisy and the despair, but simply to lay some of it down, to release it, even if for a moment, so that I can breathe, so that we can breathe, even if just for this holy day of atonement. Our tradition does not ignore despair. It gives us language for it. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, laments over Jerusalem in ruins. He says, "My eyes fail from weeping. I am in torment within. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed." That's not from the 7th of October. That's from the 7th century, BCE. We're not the first Jews to feel this way. We're just the latest. Our ancestors did not shrink from naming the reality of despair. They didn't say, "Cheer up, it'll all be fine." They wrote it into the Psalms, into the prophets, into the very canon of Torah. They gave despair a voice because they knew that to pretend otherwise is dishonest. And yet, and this is crucial, Despair is never the last word in Judaism. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, himself a man who battled depression and darkness, taught the famous line, Kol ha'ulam kulo gesher tsar ma'od, va'ikar lo hafached klal. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the most important thing is not to be afraid. The world is perilous, danger on every side, and still we must walk across the bridge. We have to journey through it. Carefully, yes, but without fear. Yet, perhaps even more relevant for us tonight is another teaching of his, less well known, but more searing. Asur lahityaesh. It is forbidden to despair. Why? Because despair is a kind of death before death, the premature end of hope. Because to despair is to say that the world cannot change, that people can't change, that we can't change. And we know that we can. We know that we have. We do it all the time. We call it growth. To despair is to say that justice cannot return, that love and faith and community are not stronger than hatred. And they are. We call that progress. To despair is to surrender the very covenant that binds us. A covenant of obligation to fix what is broken in ourselves and in our world. L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to repair the world as God intended it. Judaism insists, cry out, lament, rage, but do not give up. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks wrote, Judaism is the voice of hope in the conversation of humanity. He observed a truth as old as this night of prayer itself, that our people have had every reason to give in to despair, exile and persecution and anti-Semitism and pogroms, and yet somehow we have held on. We are here tonight because our ancestors refused to let despair have the final word. We are here tonight because we have holy chutzpah, the unmitigated gall to believe that we can change ourselves and the world for the better. See, Kol Nidre is not denial. It's not naivete. It is a spiritual pause, a sacred release that allows us to breathe again, so that tomorrow we can rise with renewed strength to face what we must face, to change what must be changed personally and collectively. Kol Nidre doesn't end the service. It begins it. We don't stay in release. We move into prayer, into song. We move from confession to renewal. The release makes space for us to be reshaped, renewed, restored, returned to ourselves. That is the rhythm that we need in our lives, in this upside-down world now and at all times. We cannot carry it all or make sense of it all, and we certainly can't do it all alone. And if you need permission from your rabbi, and let me be clear, you do not need my permission. But if you think you do, then I am giving it to you. You can put down the burden on this holiest of days. You can take a sacred and needed pause, a fast from the news and the worry and the debates and the turmoil, and you can restore your soul and return to who and what you are, your soul. It is literally a mitzvah. It is precisely why we are here. And then once restored, as I hope you will be after these high holy days, pick back up what you need to carry, what you can't live without, and continue the sacred work to redeem your soul and our humanity. I began tonight with my own confession, my own vidui, that I can't bear the news anymore, that I am disgusted by the hypocrisy, the extremism, the hatred, the way anti-Semitism is excused or even encouraged, that I'm exhausted by my crushed hopes, by broken promises, and by being used as the world's scapegoat. That even in my cautious optimism about the peace plan, I am under no illusion that the world will finally love us, accept us, or simply leave us the hell alone. But I end tonight with this truth. I will not give up, and we cannot give up. We cannot give up because our children need to inherit a better world. We cannot give up because our parents dedicated their lives to make this a better world. We cannot give up because we are an Or L'Goyim, a light unto the nations, and the world and its leaders, they are stumbling in the darkness. We cannot give up because our tradition commands us to hope. Hatikva, not just the hope of 2,000 years since exile, but since our story, the story of our people began. Jewish history has shown us that despair never had the last word for the Jewish people. Not in Egypt, not in Babylon, not in Spain, not in Europe, not in Kibbutz Be'eri, not at the Nova Music Festival, not in the tunnels of Gaza, where former hostages tell us that they clung to faith, to hope, and not here in Vancouver, in a synagogue built from the ashes of a firebombing. We cannot give up because, as the Talmud says, Kol Yisrael arevim zeh b'zeh, all of Israel is responsible for one another, and not only for Israel, but for all humanity. What is too heavy for me to carry alone, we can all carry together. And that's why this room is full tonight, because we need each other now more than ever. The very fact that we are here tonight in this sanctuary with our neighbors, with our congregation, with our people, is itself an expression of hope. That we have the audacity, the holy chutzpah, to pray together, to stand shoulder to shoulder, to sing melodies carried for generations. That is how we push back against despair. It's how we always have. For 3 millennia, we have and still do. They want us to be silent, and instead, we sing. They want us to retreat, and instead, we gather. They want us to give up, and instead, we return. Don't measure your lives by headlines. We are not defined by those who weaponize hatred for power. We are defined by what endures, by memory of who we are and where we come from, by covenant with one another and with God, by acts of justice and compassion, by the bonds of community, and by the hope of our tradition, a tradition that insists upon hope. Put down what you cannot carry. Rest when you grow weary, and then rise. Again and again, rise. Rise together to face the world with courage, with faith, with holy chutzpah. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will and ours. Amen.